back in the day, I went to the bank, I've opened my bank account there. I don't trust doing it online. But then there's also the reverse where you think, but I don't know what's happening anymore. So the technology has advanced in so many phases and stages that maybe I should click on this link because I don't know if it's good for me or not.
If I ask you when you were burglarized, it might be I've never been burglarized. In my case, I've been burglarized, but it's probably been something like 10 years ago. But if people ask me, have I had a phishing attack, I'm going to say yes. And then they can even go to say, but was it last month? The answer is still yes. And then it might even be yes for this week.
One of the worst things that can happen to anybody is having your identity, your information, all of your money stolen. And in a digital world, it's becoming even more easier to fall victim to crimes that take advantage of your trust, your faith in people, to get access to your information. And my guests today, Dr. Blanch Steyn and Mariska Wannenburg, are researchers who have looked at the susceptibility of different people to phishing. And when I say phishing, I don't mean sitting by the river, tossing a rod with bait on it into a river and hoping to catch fish. We are talking about the cyber variant of it. What can you tell me about phishing?
Thanks, Keenan. Yes, so fishing in essence is also like if it looks like a fish and it swims like a fish, it probably is a fish with a pH. So, phishing in essence is when someone or an attacker wants to impersonate another person by tricking you into divulge confidential information. It can comes in various forms, and there are various kinds of types of attacks, which is like your social engineering attacks, your technical or typical mobile phishing attacks. So phishing becomes the umbrella term for all of these, and then we must look at what type of individual the attacker is going to attack. Is it a company? Is it an individual? And is it specifically for one person? And the attacker even knows your name. So it happens in various ways. It can be through an email, which is the most popular one. Nowadays, it's also the vishing and smishing type of attacks, which is vishing is your voice where people phone you and they want to ask you your personal information, and smishing is happening through text at the moment or WhatsApp. So that is typically the overall view of what a phishing attack is. Someone that you're not familiar with, or you think you are, trying to get your information to steal a lot of funds.
And in terms of the people that get targeted, what are the how would you describe somebody that would be targeted predominantly?
So the profile of what a person would look like who will be susceptible. So that will typically be, based on my research, it was a person that is in the younger generations who doesn't have a degree, which is typically more women than men at the moment, and people who don't report phishing or don't ever undergo training of what phishing is about or cybersecurity awareness. Those are the kind of people that currently fall for phishing attacks. It's not the end all. There are literature that contradicts these findings that I found, but yeah, at the moment, that is what I would say someone would look like who falls for phishing. Now, the reasoning behind falling for a phishing attack is actually different. There's a lot of cognitive biases around it, and the attackers plays on a person's emotion, fear, anxiety, urgency. You make them feel like they have to do it now. Then there's also that overconfidence feeling to say, okay, but being overconfident and this won't happen to me, it lowers their guard for falling for a phishing attack. So yeah, I think that both of them, why people fall for a fish and the person who falls for phishing, is closely linked.
Yeah, and I think even just what you mentioned there, the overconfidence and the fear, it's it plays on the basic elements of human psychology. On the one hand, people are overcautious in some sense, and it's like they play on that sense of fear that if you don't act, something bad will happen. But in actually acting, something bad does happen. So, how do they go about doing these attacks? How do they play on that fear?
It can happen in various ways. The most common that I found is when people actually go into social media. They belong to certain types of groups. Say, for example, you belong to a Woolies group and you've received bad service at the moment, or you just had a bad customer experience and you complain. So that is called an angler phishing attack. So attackers go and see they appear to be customer support from that company. And then they would say, like, we want to help you. How can we assist you getting a better experience? And for that, just pay us, for example, a small fee. We're going to send you an email and we will gladly assist you with anything. So that is at the moment, phishing attacks that are going around. Also, the social media where people, romance attacks is a lot happening at the moment, also in America, where people just send other people in Nigeria, which they don't know they was located in Nigeria, for example, to funds. So, for example, they can't come to America or South Africa, and they need funds to get over the border for that reason. And then there is actually no physical phone conversation that ever happens with your partner in overseas, and it's only ever text, and not that great grammar, if I can say it like that. So someone that can't really, first language isn't always English. So yeah, those are the ones that I can pick up at the moment.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that. So one of the elements of a phishing attack, and it doesn't really matter whether they phone you or they send a text or they send an email, is that they leverage a type of relationship. So it can be a power relationship where they pretend to be SARS, and we all know that it's bad not to pay our taxes. So the moment you see there's an SMS from SARS, you start to panic in any case. So that power relationship can suggest or trigger you into a panic type of response. It can look as though it's from your boss that urgently needs something. So they can manage those power type of relationships. And normally then they want you to either give away your login details, or for SARS they will say, just click here and log on to SARS. And they might actually try and change your bank account to make sure that whatever SARS had to refund you will go to somebody else. With that type of attack, they create a sense of urgency that you must do it now. So the moment you get a text message that creates that sense of urgency, you should actually just, on a personal level, have a red flag and say, stop. Why should I respond quickly to a text? Why should I respond quickly to an email? If it was really that important, they might have phoned me, but then you might be susceptible to a phone attack. One of the phone attacks I experienced recently was somebody phoning me to tell me that they're from my cell provider and there's been a request for a SIM swap. Now, that's also a power relationship. It will create a panic, because then if they have my SIM swap and they might have access to my bank account, all the SMSs go to all the pins will go to my cell phone, and then I don't have that. So they tend to create that sense of urgency that want you to respond to them. Pause and just go back and say, if it was really my cell phone provider, I can go onto my computer, look at what is their customer number, phone them, and ask them, I've just received a report on a SIM swap. So be careful to respond to the attacker. It might still be legit, but then rather go make sure that you either have a list. If you're older, maybe just extend your little phone book that you've had from years gone by and put in all the customer service numbers, all the fraud hotline numbers, so that if you get a suspicious call from the bank and ask you whether this transaction was suspicious, you can just tell them, yes, it is suspicious, thanks, I'll phone the fraud hotline, and then phone the fraud hotline. not respond to the person that phoned you. And also think about when people phone you, especially with phone attacks, so they can pretend to be from your alarm company and say, "Hi, I'm from the alarm company. What's your password?" It's like, you phoned me. I'm not telling you anything. So be careful what you tell other people. Don't automatically respond if it's a call from the alarm company, unless you know your alarm just triggered. And you're there. You expect them to phone.
Yeah, that's true. No, I just wanted to add something about the tax season that's actually going on. So the tax season in South Africa started now in July, and when I visited, I'm also teaching taxation at Akademia, and when I had class the other day, I told my students that there were already four phishing attacks that happened in this amount of time, where people impersonate SARS. So, but most of them, like you can imagine, is to get a refund. So, but the latest one was, it was a new one I've never seen before, was where the attackers asked for FICA documentation. So they ask for all your personal information and saying you're not FICA ready, or you're not FICA at our branch or at SARS, so please provide your information. So that was just a new one that I've seen.
Okay, that one sounds very smart, like in a twisted criminal way. You know, it's looking at the current environment, looking at what people actually want and need. Because I'm getting a big sense that they play on people's desires, you know, and the excuse me, the moment that you know people's desires, you are able to take control of them. You're able to play on that power dynamic. And there's a book I read, The Art of Seduction by Robert Greene. Now, it's an interesting book. So you'd think it's a book that speaks on like how to seduce people, you know, to be Casanova himself. But the core essence of the book, what it looks at is more of a dark psychology perspective of things, which Robert Greene likes to do in his books. And it's how do people take advantage of your deep desires? How do they use power to manipulate you? You know, so if you think of some, in the case of seduction, so let's say romantic seduction, if somebody wants to win the affection of somebody, you're going to put on your best performance. You're going to try and be your best self. And, you know, there might be stuff that somebody wants to hide about themselves. You know, you want to present yourself as you more than what you actually are. And some people might even go off flat out lying. Like if somebody knows they have anger issues or something, they're going to do their best to hide it. Now, the same with scams. I'm getting the feeling that they adopt this persona to make you see them as something else that they are not, and they're taking advantage of that desire that you have. So, in the case of where, with the Nigerian prince that you meet on Tinder, he will play on that desire that you are so lonely that you want somebody and you think you found the one. Or with the text now, that a lot of people feel uncertain of what to do. They feel kind of overwhelmed dealing with text. And then when somebody comes along giving them the exact cues, give me this information and I'll help you exactly as needed. You know, it's that sense of you want this safety net, and they look at it and some way or another they know exactly what buttons to push. So
That's true.
why is it younger people? Because in my mind, you know, the typical narrative is usually older people aren't tech savvy. The younger generation is more tech savvy. They're more educated on it. Yet it seems to go the other way around from what you're saying.
My perception, and a little bit of what my research is, and I think Blanche will talk to this as well, is because it comes down to trust. The younger generation grew up with it. Some of them starts to look at an iPad and a phone when they're 2 years old. So they're very, very trustworthy towards these devices. So they don't think about malicious links. They don't think about anything that can bad happen to them. They think that if someone talks to you online, it is actually that person who he says it is. So I think from a younger generation, because they trust the technology and the digital world we live in, they're more susceptible. Whereas the older people think, well, I don't trust this. Back in the day, I went to the bank, I've opened my bank account there, I don't trust doing it online. But then there's also the reverse where you think, but I don't know what's happening anymore. So the technology has advanced in so many phases and stages that maybe I should click on this link because I don't know if it's good for me or not.
Yeah, I actually think there can be a group of older people because we didn't actually really take into account in the research people that are old, already retired. So I think the retired group can be a susceptible group, and they're also mostly females. So I would generally caution females to be more susceptible, simply because our DNA or our chromosomes automatically enables females to have better relationships. You can see it easily in a restaurant when there's a group of females. They don't go alone to the toilets. They go together and they chat and they do lipstick, and it's a whole additional social experience. So because of that social experience, we're more susceptible to especially things like WhatsApp. So I might be cautious of SMSs coming in. I don't trust emails, but now WhatsApp is my friends because my friends are on WhatsApp. But I can open a WhatsApp account and call it anything. I won't be able to lie about my phone number because you have to link it to your phone number, but I could have had a fake phone or what they call a burner phone, which is not that easy, hopefully not that easy to get in South Africa, and utilize that number and create a fake option and run it from romance scams. And you actually, I think there can be a risk where older people might not actually trust the scenario, but still fall for the romance scam simply because they received attention. So if you go back to psychology, you also have that with children. They will do something naughty because it gives them attention. So even though I know it's going to give me the wrong type of attention, it's better to get some attention than nothing. And that can be a message for people that know older people that are in that vulnerable group, to maybe have a specific session with them. You can have a WhatsApp video call with a little group of them together once a week, just so that they have something to counter that need, or at least address the need for attention. The same is actually also for young girls, so that they're so used to the cell phone being their friend. And to some extent, there's a level of addiction. So you'll see it in how quickly they respond if they do a WhatsApp. If you send me a WhatsApp, I might not see it today. And or I might look at it, just once now and again to see if there's anything urgent, because there are some urgent groups that I'm on. But I'm not necessarily going to activate all the sounds and look at everything that opens it up. But if they are so responsive to WhatsApp, they actually might respond to attack before thinking. So the moment it's urgent, it's going to get a sense of, yes, I need to click on it now, I need to do something. Another reason why young people are vulnerable to SARS attacks is actually because they haven't been paying taxes for a while. So I've just started working in January, February. I've just learned that I have to do tax for the first time in my life. And because I've actually worked for 2 months, I'm likely to get a refund. So people might actually target me because, firstly, I'm a good person to target in terms of getting money out of me. But secondly, I don't know enough about the scenario, so I might fall for a tax scam. And then the receiver makes it a little bit worse for us in South Africa because they do send SMSs. I would actually just recommend to the people, because we want to fall for that, somebody's going to make it easier to do taxes. If you want to get somebody to make it easier to do taxes, there are people registered that can assist you with that. You tend to pay them money. But you can also just, take off a day's leave and go and make an appointment and go and visit the receiver of revenue. And I actually recommend that for older people. If there's anything, just go and visit, do what you've done in the old days before all technology. Visit the bank, visit the receiver of revenue. It will give you some much needed attention. And I think if they send a bulk SMS out to old people that they're concerned aren't paying taxes, having all of them visit them will make it less likely that they'll send a bulk email out to old people next year, saving them from the pressure and also reducing the risk that they will be susceptible to phishing attacks.
Okay, it sounds a lot like there's not a one size fits all solution for everybody. Like it depends on what demographic you are looking at. You know, if it's older generation, it's more uh, helping them understand where they are susceptible. And, you know, if I bring it back to why women are more susceptible, if I look at the typical personality profile traits for men and women, women tend to score higher in agreeableness. Like they tend to be more, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Compliant. Like if somebody tells them you have to do X, Y, Z, they more trustworthy. They like, oh, I have to get this done. I don't want to disappoint this person. And women are also more vulnerable in the sense that, you know, they value safety more. So they play on that notion that, you know, they want to be safe. So in your paper, you looked at different industries as well. What about the susceptibility of people in different industries?
I think there's some industries that are less susceptible. And it's actually because in those industries, there's a practice internally in the industry to train employees and customers. So one of the industries that we see on a frequent basis that do engage in training is actually the banking industry. You'll get emails from the banking industry, and often if you actually physically go to the bank, they tend to have these TVs up, and on the TVs they actually show phishing attacks and explain why it's an attack, show what the red flags is to look for. So I think from that industry perspective, because people that want to attack you either want to steal your information because they want to steal money from you elsewhere. They can do it in two ways. They can open a bank if they have enough of your FICA information, enough of the information that says who you are, like your ID, a physical address. They can actually open fake accounts and borrow money from those fake accounts. And then the people are going to come to you to ask for you to repay it. Or they can steal money from you either by getting your banking information or by getting refunds back to you. So the moment people want that information, just have to be cautious in it. And that's where the bank will send out an email to say, we will never ask you for these things. And then we should remember what we should never give the bank via email or via text or via calls. And rather, when people want that, to say, I will go to the bank account. Or I will go to a bank branch. The cell phone companies are also fairly good. If you look at their websites, they have nice information about scams. But I don't think they are as sophisticated as the banks in terms of training customers. And then I think industries that might not be engaging in training customers, if you think about your retail industry, I don't think I've seen SMSs from Pick n Pay or ShopRite or Woolworths about phishing attacks, but so they can also actually, as an industry, the companies have to take responsibility in terms of assisting their customers to train, because if even though they might not part of the attack, if your customer suffered attack, you might lose them as a customer because they lost money, but you might also lose them as a customer because they lost trust in you. So I think there's we have to remember that in South Africa we follow the Ubuntu principle in governance. So companies actually has a responsibility to look a little bit broader than the company itself in making money, and think about to what extent can they care for the society that's around that company that rely on them. From an individual perspective, I think we just have to have little checklists. And internally, we can in a family, because if I think about the frequency of phishing attacks, if I ask you when you were burglarized, it might be, I've never been burglarized. In my case, I've been burglarized, but it's probably been something like 10 years ago. But if people ask me, have I had a phishing attack, I'm going to say yes. And then they can even go to say, but was it last month? The answer is still yes. And then it might even be yes for this week. So we're so used to either deleting those emails or deleting the SMSs that we don't always pay attention to them. But maybe we should pause a little bit and just do what Mariska did with the class. And in your family, when the children are around the dinner table, say, but I've seen this phishing attack. This is why I think it is a phishing attack. and this is what you need to do. And you can make arrangements with Omar to not respond immediately as a default, so that you at least teach her never respond immediately. Rather, once a day, I'll come by you and I'll check all those things and tell you which is legit and which is not. So that you give people a recipe of how to act, and it might be different from the different examples. I've never realized how important recipes or to some extent in business we call it disaster management plans, but we can have little disaster management plans for children. So to give you an example, I explained to my children when they were in kindergarten that if a child gets injured, you must call the teacher. You shouldn't try and deal with this injury because especially children all have little dirty hands. You don't want to make it worse. So they learned to call the teacher. And then 5 years later, my son was actually in a scenario where his brother was bitten by a dog and he went to call the teacher. So despite the panic, he activated the plan. And I never knew that plans can be so powerful up until that point, because I would expect panic and shock to negate any rational thought. But because there was a plan, they could act on the plan. And we can use the same plans to teach people about phishing attacks, being cautious about when is it acceptable. If you're not sure, rather phone your mom, phone your dad, phone another friend, or wait and ask them at the end of the day. And discuss these around the families, just like we used to discuss physical security measures. You know, you teach children not to talk to strangers, but we don't teach them how to not talk to strangers on the internet.
I wanted to add about the industries. So when I did the research about which industries would I like to test, in a sense, you know, to do my research about and see how many people within the legal, education, and the fraud and forensic industry, of those people who are actually one of the, you know, we combat some of in the forensic fields. We don't want fraud to happen. But how susceptible are those people who actually work with it every day? Legal. I mean, the Cybercrimes Act came out. They actually filing lawsuits about cyber criminals. And then education. You would think, you know, people with highly educated, a lot of degrees, why would they fall for phishing attacks? And what I realized was those type of industries were not actually part of any research overseas. That includes Europe and America. And I decided, okay, I'm going to do not even the first phishing research in South Africa, but I want to target those industries to see how risk averse they are as well. And I wanted to add about, you know, about the retail companies that are not really creating an awareness about phishing attacks. The number one scam at the moment comes from the retail industry, which are gift cards. Gift cards are used as the most often scam, saying you've earned a voucher and you can use the money. You just need to pay a fee and we'll send you the card or something like that. So the retail industry are really susceptible at the moment. They've undergone a lot of phishing attacks.
Yeah, and I think also the retail industry, it's where everybody's like signed up to get emails and stuff from them on new offers and things. And especially like with Shein and Temu, it seems like they always have some sale or something. So you're constantly getting bombarded by messages from them. So it's very easy to get another one from somebody that's not them, and you like, oh, this seems like a good deal. Let me jump on that. And I imagine also industries that deal a lot with information would be susceptible to it as well. If I have to just think why the law industry, the legal industry might be prevalent. Yeah, why phishing might be prevalent in the legal industry is that they deal with a lot of information. There's a lot of correspondence as well. So, you know, constantly getting emails from people, having to take information from one person and then give it to another person. So wherever there's this constant transfer of information, you know, it's not necessarily a game of quality. It can sometimes just be a numbers game. That if they target enough people, there will be one person that just has that one day where they're not locked in, where they're just feeling overwhelmed. that they're not in a conscious mental state to make sense of what is going on. And there's this phenomenon in psychology called um, amygdala hijacking, and I get a sense they play on this. So it's where they exploit your emotional state. So from what you described earlier, it's they create a sense of urgency in you. They'll tell you, you need to pay this amount, or if it's something good, like here's an offer for you. So it puts you in that state where you're more relaxed, your guard's down, you're excited. It puts you more in what's it called? In this book, Thinking Fast and Slow, he refers to it as System 1 thinking and System 2 thinking. So System 2 thinking is more when you reading a book and you slow and methodical thinking, you think things through, um, you're more logical. System 1 is more like your lizard brain. It goes on your primal instincts. It's safety now. It's deal with the whatever danger is in front of you. Forget about the rest of the world. And another industry I found very interesting in your paper was the medical industry also seemed to be susceptible to it. Why would the medical industry be, a target for it? What value does somebody phishing get out of information from there?
Because I love that question, because I don't know if you watched Blanche lately, but the NHLS, the National Health Laboratory Services, were actually attacked, and which resulted in a ransomware attack. So what happened is the reason they are susceptible, the medical, is I would say the cyber world is not a priority for them. It's to save lives. And they use system and technology just to enable that. Get blood results easily. We update a system from the laboratory and it's reflected in a hospital. So they use technology as a vehicle to get their medical responsibilities done. But they've never realized how susceptible they can be in terms of opening an email, not thinking twice about what's happening, clicking on a link. And what happened to NHL is the entire system were hacked and could not be accessed for a couple of days. So no blood tests could have been, they couldn't have revealed any blood tests. People couldn't get medical care, which actually depended on the results of the medical tests. So I think the awareness in the medical industry is not that great. And if that can, be sort of improved, they can prevent this going in the future. Ransomware, I know companies are not really always, from a reputational perspective, want to reveal what did a phishing attack resulted in a ransomware. But I think the more companies come forward and we make people aware of what's going on and that it's happening to a lot of companies, it's not just me, it's not just my company, it will also start to improve the awareness and to prevent it from happening.
Yeah, and I want to add to that, especially on the company level. I understand for doctors, they need certain information. So previously, the information came to them via envelopes. Now, that's an impractical mechanism. And it makes sense that if I had some x-rays somewhere, blood tests somewhere, and I go to my doctor, which is in a different building, might even be in a different town, that they can access that information because they need it to safeguard me and to treat me. If I'm suddenly fell sick and I end up in a hospital, they might know who I am because they have my ID, but they might not know what medicine was subscribed to me. So if all of that's on a central system that they can access, it can lead to improved healthcare. And then the doctors sort of think, but because I'm just focusing on patient care, there's IT, they will look after security. And that's, I think, the big challenge we have in today's environment, because security, the necessity to help support the security of the IT system has now filtered down to the user. We can't say IT has a responsibility. There's certain things they must do, but there's also certain things I need to do. I need to be careful of not clicking on a link that can make the whole system susceptible to ransomware attack, of not maybe giving people undue access. So one of the ways auditors actually test systems can be what's called physical penetration testing. Is I can go there with a little T-shirt, IBM on it, talk my way in and say, I'm from IT. I'm here to replace a computer, and at that stage, as soon as I can touch a computer, I can actually physically load malicious software on it. And so you try and see whether the weaknesses is in the protection of the system, and that's on a physical level.
Act as if you belong, and people will believe you belong there.
Yeah, no, and it makes sense if IT wear a T-shirt. So if you go there with jeans and T-shirts, and I'm from IT, people will all understand it. But the same can also happen logically. So, and this is something that's a mindset, is we can have break-ins without glass being broken. So if somebody can hack into your computer system, that's a break-in. Now that's less likely to happen. The more easier way is that you actually give them access by clicking on the wrong link. And that wrong link is a malicious email. A more sophisticated way of doing it is people use QR codes. Now, I'm one of those generation that I just decided I'm not going to try and learn how they work. So I won't be susceptible to any QR code scam, but there's QR codes on things for legit business reasons. But I can paste any other QR. It's easy to generate a QR code. It's easy to print it. And I can paste another QR code on top of a legitimate one. So I might sit in the restaurant and think this is the QR code to the menu. If I'm a good attacker, I'm going to add the menu to it, but add other things as well. And so the QR code might be a scam. I might think I'm going to go on to, say, McDonald's website, order food from them. In the meantime, it's not the McDonald's website, and the moment I put in my credit card detail, they can steal money from me. So that's some of the newer scams. It's not as prevalent in South Africa. It's a little bit more prevalent in America. And it can also ask you, for example, sometimes to download another app. So that would be something you have to be cautious of. If you click on the link and you have to download, say, another Facebook, while you already have Facebook, don't. Because that might not be the actual Facebook. It's one of those pretending Facebook apps, and it's guide to harvest your login information. And if you want that, at least then they can hack your Facebook account from that point forward. The same can be with Spotify or Pinterest. So they will target apps that people love to access and make that the easy way to get login details. And from there, they might actually scam your friends and pretend they're you and ask your friends to give them money because you've been in a car accident and you just need 20,000 to get, pay all the essentials. Which is highly unlikely, because if I can SMS or WhatsApp my friends and it's really a car accident, I'm going to phone them.
Sorry, I wanted to add about the restaurants. Blanche mentioned the restaurants. So it's very true that a man-in-the-middle attack exists, especially at airports, your favorite coffee shop, wherever. And most of us are sometimes out of data, so you just want to log onto a quick free Wi-Fi network just to download something or sit and scroll in a restaurant, whatever the reason would be. And that type of Wi-Fi attack we call an evil twin or man-in-the-middle attack, where you think you're logging on to a Wi-Fi or secured Wi-Fi network, but actually, if you sit and do your banking on that Wi-Fi, they can actually steal your username and password while you typed it on that network. So then you also unwillingly gave away, without clicking on any link, without opening any email attachment, you gave away your credentials. And that's just a very important one, not to rather ask Mug and Bean for the password and go into a secure network than to use a free one that might be looking like a Mug and Bean, Wi-Fi network, but it's impersonated. Yeah.
That's actually quite a big inconvenience, because everything that is done for people's convenience seems to be weaponized. If I think with the podcast, for me, it's a lot quicker and efficient just to say, hey, I've got this YouTube channel. You can have a look at it. Here's a QR code, scan, and it takes you right there, instead of telling somebody the name and they have to go search it manually. And for restaurants as well, where they feel they can, save on printing paper and They can easily change the menu when need be on the website as opposed to printing it out each time, taking that and weaponizing it. And also situations where people don't have Wi-Fi, don't have data, then they use the Wi-Fi, and taking that. I get this sort of psychopathic and narcissistic element to it. So, like the dark personality traits, there's like a nuance to them. So it's not like somebody is all they completely narcissistic or psychopathic or anything. We all lie on the spectrum, but I imagine people carrying out these attacks lie further on the spectrum. It's they look at what people value, what people see as authority, and look how they can take advantage of it. That's a strong trait of narcissism. It's looking how you can weaponize relationships for your benefit. Put yourself in a better standing in spite of what it might do to others.
To add what you're saying there, I did a research paper on the investigation of white collar crimes and sort of the psychology of why do people defraud others. And I also found that the development of the amygdala was underdeveloped than those who were not showing tendencies of psychopathic or something like that. So it came through that the brain is to some extent responsible for being a fraudster. But I think what I wanted to add as well was we talked about the psychology of people falling for fraud. But what about the psychology about being a fraudster? And what causes what is the cause of you being a fraudster? And there was a fraud theory by Donald Cressy, which says that there are three things why people become a fraudster. And that's the first one is pressure. So you need to pay medical bills for a family member who is very, very ill. It actually leads you to becoming, I need to steal some money. People at work are not looking. There are not very strong controls or there are weaknesses in the processes identified. And they take advantage of it. So the first one is pressure. Fraudsters, they are under financial pressure. The other one is rationalization. They're saying, you know what, companies owe me this money. I pay a lot of taxes in the world. They owe me. And then the last one, I would say, is opportunity. And that also links to the pressure to say if you don't have strong internal controls or there's a lack of oversight, then you won't, you'll easily be able to defraud your company or other individuals.
Yeah, and I think even speaking to that, the financial pressure, and it's like the company owes you something. There's something that I've noticed, like when you look at what does it take to make people evil? Like nobody is just evil for no reason. If you look in history, there's always some sort of justification. There's always a victim narrative. It's this was done to me, or I'm in this situation because of X, Y, Z. So then it justifies your actions. If the perceived injustice to yourself is great enough, it justifies any action to rectify it. The ends justify the means seems to be what they do. So what could determine what industry somebody targets? Because I imagine, is it like a single person or a single syndicate targeting the medical industry only, or do they do a scattergun approach and attack everywhere they can?
I actually think it might differ from whether it's a syndicate attack. That probably will do a scattergun attack, and they might actually receive help from other syndicate members. Whether it's personal. If you understand the industry a little bit better, you can script your attack more focused. But that might not also be so relevant now because they actually have AI helping them. One of the factors that can also play a role is how the criminal rationalize. And because it's IT sophisticated people to some extent doing the attacks, they might just see it as a game. So just like you go on in a single person game and see who you can win. So in a single shooter, your goal is to shoot as many people. You can go in a single shooter phishing attack against real people and see how much money you can make, how many people you can sucker, and you can sort of see that as an internal scorecard of your own ability. It's not you can get gratification not just from the money that you steal, but actually also from the wins in that. Now, normal people will be counted to illegal activities because if you are part of illegal activities, your friends are also criminals. And I don't want to be friends with criminals because they have no moral values. And that's the disadvantage. Your friends can, they next time you can be the guy targeted of a scam because they realize that you make more money than they did. And unfortunately, you can make so much money that you can make more money that you could do on a legitimate manner. So you can build IT skill set because you've learned computers at school and you've taught yourself. But you end up with, if you just have matric, your job opportunities with just matric would be quite low. That will add to the pressure scenario. And if I can launch 1,000 attacks a day and I get one and it pays me 500 Rand, it might be more than I will get as a day laborer somewhere else. From a pressure point, it can satisfy their needs, their normal human needs, and I think that's one of the problems society are faced, especially South Africa, where there's too many people that's struggling to get jobs.
Yeah, sharks eat well, but they forced to live with other sharks, as the saying goes. You know, it's when you're in that space, you can't really tell anybody what you're doing except the people that you are complicit with. Anybody else would, look at you a bit. I don't really want to associate with you. I know I can't trust you. And reputation is something that is more valuable than anything, when even if you're done with your career in any space, it's going to be the one thing that you have after, no matter what happens. Like, as Maya Angelou says, people don't remember you for who you are, they remember for how you make them feel. And if people know you're doing this, it's always going to be at arm's length.
So the fact that phishing or cybercrime in essence is paying off is very true. So there's a anti-phishing work group that reports on different or various types of phishing stats every quarter, and they found that the average wire transfer amount from business email compromise attacks was 1.5 million. The average. So in dollars, that will be like almost $90,000 a wire transfer. So that happens through an average, an attack could cost you that. So you can make 1.5 million every day. So it's really a profitable cybercrime. It's a very popular way of making money. But obviously there are measures in place. So if you have a bank account somewhere, there are checks and balances that every financial services company would do to find out the legitimacy of money and where it goes, following the money scenario. But yeah.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like a lot of money. I can't imagine what I would do making that much in a day. But in terms of catching people that do it, how can they be caught? So what are the law implications of being caught for it as well? And yeah, how do they evade justice all the time?
Yeah, so I can just maybe quickly give an overview. So the Cyber Crimes Act came about in 2020. So President Cyril Ramaphosa actually signed it off. And so cybercrime became actually an offense that can be criminal under South African law. The thing is, to find the criminal that actually sent that phishing attack, you would need IP addresses. But sometimes the IP addresses are very, very hidden. You would also be able to get some browser information. So that typical So you would also be able to get IP addresses, information from there, so where the phishing email originates from, then your browser information. So that typical group that I told you about, the anti-phishing working group, they actually gave a lot of great information for which browsers the attackers use to send phishing emails from. Other metadata is also available to law enforcement on that email to find the person that sent the email. But I would say, without actually, if that attacker is not sitting in South Africa, there's going to be jurisdiction complications and implications from if that person sits in Russia or Nigeria or in Africa. So yeah, and then it becomes more complicated, and cyber lawyers will definitely need to come into play.
Okay, so is that like a new profession that's emerging, like cyber law, for instance?
So what happens is you have to have a team approach. You have to have, I would say, people with high hacker skills. We call them white hat hackers to assist you in following the trail. The problem is, as soon as there's jurisdictional information and you actually want private information, you have to get court orders to give you access to that information, because I can't go to a bank and ask them for information without having a court order for them. Otherwise, they can just refuse. So to follow it has jurisdictional implications. It might be the court order in a different country. So it is possible for companies to follow it up. It's costly. So yeah, there's always a cost-benefit analysis that you have to do. Is decide to, if we've just lost 500,000, to learn the lesson from it and rather make sure that there aren't any other similar cases that occur. You can report it to the police. So if there's a lot of similar reports going to them, they could follow up. But our South African police services aren't sophisticated in terms of cyber crimes. There is a stage where it does become an international crime, and the follow the money actually helps, because our banks are fairly good at reporting unusual transactions. And even Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is actually, they always talk about Bitcoin as being an open ledger because it's a distributed network. And people don't understand is you can actually see the transactions going through the Bitcoin. So you can see, you're just not going to know this is a transaction from Blanche. It's going to give other identification codes with it. But once you know that that code is me, you know what money went to me or not. So that can be followed through. And there's software that actually helps investigators follow that path. And some of the paid, there's free software as well, but some of the paid software was used recently in a court case in America where they actually accepted the evidence of the follow the money approach that the software helped to track. So although software can be some of the problems, it can also be a solution. But I think a bigger solution for us is to just warn each other and to think about how do we communicate events, to be transparent. And yes, I was a sucker. I was caught with a phishing attack. This is what we've done, and to learn from that lesson. So one of the biggest risks is, especially if something comes through to your cell phone. We all see emails on our cell phone, but don't react to it. Rather open your computer and make sure that email actually came from the right address. So one of the scams that they do in terms of phishing attacks is they'll pretend to be the CEO of a company, and then they'll use what is called spoofing. So it will actually look as though the email came from the CEO of the company, asking you to urgently pay an invoice. And that might not be an unusual transaction. It might be that the CEO asks the accountant to pay invoices. But it can be good just to walk to them or to phone them and say, do you really want me to pay this invoice? I've heard a story where the CEO and the CFO were sitting around the boardroom, and the accountant received, the CFO received the instruction to pay invoice on his cell phone, and he looked up and said, but why do you send this to me now? You can just ask me. He said, but I didn't send it. So sharing things like that can help people build in alternative controls to prevent it, but to really follow the criminals, we have to actually work together with other countries on an international level, follow the guidance from the Financial Action Task Force, And also, this is where South Africa is grey listed because we slacked in updating our laws to actually enable all those trackings. And also remember that some of those attacks are actually to fund terrorism. So it's not just always an individual wanting to make money. It can also be a terrorist organization that needs money because they want to buy guns to shoot people. So we have I would say, larger societal responsibility to be cautious about it. And also, if it happens and I lost money, it's actually up to the individual to lay those charges with the police. Not just sulk and silent, because then on the statistics, the police can realize that they might have only 10,000 cases of cyber attacks in 2020, but now they have 100,000. And that can give them grounds for starting a different unit that can manage these crimes better.
Yeah, I wanted to add, so sometimes law enforcement, Keenan, sometimes doesn't have the resources to follow up on every phishing attack or every cybercrime that happens. So I think there's a little bit of improvement to be done from a government perspective to investigate these crimes. I mean, we are living in a digital world where, I mean, everything is dependent on technology. So the resources to investigate cyber crimes should also be better, especially going forward. We're not getting away from this. It's going to become our norm. Yeah, theft will always be there, physical theft, but cyber theft is also a thing.
Yeah, again, where you gave the example that some of them might be doing it for a terrorist group. Normally, terrorist groups have like some sort of doctrine that they're pursuing, so then it justifies this action doing X, Y, Z. Because you are doing it for a good cause after all. That's what people tend to believe. And something I found interesting about PayPal when they started out, they were losing a lot of money at first. And one thing they found they were losing money to was just fraudulent transactions. And they tried two approaches. So first they got experts, but then they found it was way too much for all of them to deal with. Then they tried creating an automated system. And it worked, but for like 5 hours. The moment the fraudsters caught on to how the system works, they worked around it, they changed their approach. So what they did as their third approach, I don't remember the name they gave it. I think it's Evo, so they named it after the first guy they caught using their approach. And it's creating an automated system that flags potentially fraudulent activity. And then they'll have the experts deal with them. So, because it's only flagged, the perpetrator won't get, you won't be made aware of what is happening on the other end. But then the people that understand the whole system and everything can deal with him and find exactly where this person is, who it is, all their details. And I imagine the same thing would be necessary here in South Africa. Yeah, and from what I'm getting from you, the first and foremost thing is mitigation first. Prevent the issue from happening in the first place. Arm yourself. Make sure you know how to keep yourself safe, that you're not giving your information out, that you are looking out for those around you. You're sharing information about what you should and shouldn't do, and just being informed. Even if you are not responsible for the way the world is, you are responsible for how you act. And that should be the first and foremost thing. Anything you want to add on what people can do to arm themselves against being a victim?
I just want to give one example, and that will be my final thought almost. So Keenan and I did research about phishing for almost a year. And obviously I studied at the University of Pretoria, where Blanche is from, and she was my study leader. And I looked, and the UP gave us a lot of access to a lot of academic journals, and academic journals is normally our primary source for information. But Keenan, there was one article that I couldn't get access to, and I thought, today is the day that I'm actually going to pay a couple of euro for this document, just so that I can read the content thereof, because it was about phishing susceptibility in Europe. And I paid the couple of euros, and that afternoon there was a $1 transaction going off my bank account. So I've been phished. So I was like, I'm doing research about phishing. I'm buying a phishing article, and I'm being phished. And they stole my credentials on that I don't know if it was PayPal, but when you said PayPal, it was ringing a bell. And I'm just saying. So I mean, you can take all the measures you want. You can be doing research for a year. You can know about all the safety measures and countermeasures to be putting in place, not to fall for phishing attacks. But none of us is 100% safeguarded against falling for phishing attacks.
Yeah, it sounds like lower the odds, but they won't completely eliminate it at all.
What we need to do is just be cautious of it, that it exists. There's chances that you'll click on the wrong link at stages. Now, if it's a work computer, you can ask for IT just to check whether there's malicious software on it or not. If it's a personal computer, you'll have to go to somebody that can do IT and check whether there's malicious software or not. Or just run your antivirus. I'm not sure if you need to have a sophisticated antivirus to pick up all the things. So think about how do you do transactions on the internet. I actually have a specific credit card that I use for the internet. Now there's virtual cards, so that you have a card that has a limited level of exposure. So my virtual card that I have is like a savings account. I have to put money in it before I can use it. It's not a credit card. But that can be a safeguard, because even if they steal it, that information, the limited amount that they can steal from it, or the amount they can steal from it, is limited. So you can try and take measures like that, and share stories about being phished to help other people recognize the scenarios quicker, and also think about just what to do. Mostly our default option would be to delete the email. In the workplace, you should actually, there's normally IT that you can forward the email to, because then they can filter those emails actually when it come into the email server, to protect all the employees. So and I think it's important to sort of, just like we had physical safety discussions and normal other trainings, to include cybersecurity types of trainings in it as well.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Blanch Steyn and Mariska Wannenburg. If people want to follow work that you're doing, or learn more about phishing, where can they go?
They can click on the university's web link, or go to our Google Scholar profiles and see what research we do from there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for being guest on the podcast today. I think this is really an invaluable episode. Like, there will be a lot for anybody to learn about cybercrime, like what exactly it is, how it is done, why like people do it, and most of all, how to guard themselves against it, how to not be a victim, how to instead be vigilant about it and protect themselves. Thank you so much again. Keep well.
Thanks very much, Keenan. Thanks
Thanks,
for having us.
Keenan.